Alright, so this should be the last video on the overdrive. Just give you a little tour how it looks now. It is really shiny. Still don't have any oil on it. I'll tell you in just a second why. Sorry. I'll tell you why in just a second. I'll tell you just a second why. There's the shifting. Third, second. There's no oil on it, mind that. Second, third, second, third, second. Neutral. It's neutral. Second, third, third, second. Reverse. First, reverse. Alright. Reverse. And just note what happens to the overdrive lever here. By the way, the only thing that this does, it disables the overdrive. The overdrive is normally enabled. So if you don't do anything, it'll be on. You have to push this backwards to disable it, or the solenoid disables it here. Just watch that. I'm going to put it in reverse, and you'll see that this will move slightly. See that? See that? But once again, it's because there's a shaft here, push this back and disables the overdrive when you're reversing the car. So otherwise, the car would just go the other way around on those clutch rollers, those old bearings. Remember, the cylinders, and it will just overrun. So overdrive has to be disabled in order for you to reverse the car, which it does automatically. You don't have to. I know some cars, they used to have what's called a reverse switch or something like that on top here apparently, but it's not necessary. The manual actually mentions that. I guess it's for the backup lights, I imagine, but I don't know. But the other thing I'd like to mention is, remember there's a spring in here. Ideally, it should spring this back, but it's a little stuck apparently. If it's halfway, it'll spring back normal. You'll notice that if I put it in reverse, this will just, you see, it's just, there's no spring tension on it because the spring is being compressed by the reverse shaft here. Once I let go of the overdrive, you see that now it's got pressure to it. It won't. And it'll come back by itself around here. I push it all the way here. It doesn't come back by itself. I believe this should change once get the oil in there. Since right now it's completely dry. The entire transmission is dry. Imagine this should change. It should come back more easily. But I mean, if it doesn't for whatever reason, I could just add another spring here somewhere. But I thought this entire process was finished. But what I will do is I'll mention these three parts here: the solenoid, the governor, and the lockout switch. I'll just I'll show you the disassembly of this here, because there are a few not problems, but just things that I did wrong here. And as I was cleaning up my tools, I noticed this. Oops, forgot to put the bearings on the input shaft here. So, but anyways, it'll just it's kind of good that that happened, because I'll show you how to remove this snap ring here using only a chisel and a washer and the already existing bolts here. Yeah, the other thing, I don't have any gasket on here now. This is what the old gasket was. You can see it's just flimsy paper, so it's soaked with oil. It's just paper, guys. Now I was thinking of putting a rubberized gasket like this, just a shower floor pan liner. Use it to line the shower floors. It's just rubber basically. But I said I'll leave it like this, and I'll just keep an eye on it. If it starts to leak, then I'll just take out the oil and put that rubber gasket in. If not, I think it'll be fine like this, because I mean, that paper there, I mean, I doubt that it makes a difference. The overdrive does look very square. Everything's nice and there's no dents or anything. So, anyways, the oil, that's another thing. Thickness of the oil matters, right? Thicker oil is harder to leak. So, not just this, but some other application, it might be leaking because you have oil that's too thick. Right? And another thing that I'd like to mention is, remember those clutch rollers? That's what they're called. Those little cylinders that are wedged against the round part that goes in here. Well, if the oil is too thin, they will slip, right? So that is mentioned, I believe, in the manual. Well, it's not mentioned directly on the manual, but there's a book out there from Fifth Avenue Garage. They just add a little bit of information to the manual that I showed you. The guy there does mention, I think Randy is his name. He does mention that if it's too thin, then it'll slip, right? And you don't want that. So it can't be too thin. It can't be too thick. Hopefully, there won't. I'd have to make two gaskets here. One for this side here, between the manual transmission and the adapter. The other one between the adapter and the overdrive housing. So, but ideally, I shouldn't have to. Another thing that I will do is, you'll see that these bolts here, the four bolts that holds everything, that hold everything together, there's no washers on them. Now, good thing about washers is that they distribute the weight, pressure, a little more evenly. So, I probably will. I mean, this here's pretty indestructible, but I might just do it later, just because I really like to be 1,000%. 100% isn't enough, as I always say. Another thing I'd like to mention, this paint here. I'll show you the paint. I use this paint here, and it is proper. It's for use on metal, steel, right? It's called trim clad. I use the gloss paint. It's really shiny. Gloss means really shiny. There's the other one that's called matte, whatever, flat, something like that. And it's just, it's not shiny at all. It's really what the name says, really flat. I just like the really shiny, wet look of it. So if you do paint it, Um, I did put this on a spray gun, by the way. No, but if you do this paint, it's really, really viscous. It's really thick. So if you put it on a spray gun, that's, you know, it's got a small hole for where the paint comes out. It will just clog the gun. You can either, you know, I believe you might be able to thin. You will be able to thin that paint. I just used a universal paint thinner, but ideally you don't really have to if you have a gun with a wide nozzle. And the gun that I have is, I'll show you here. By the way, it's always good to, I always like to keep them inside plastic bags so that dirt and, you know, dust doesn't reach them. But it is this one here that I used. It is from China. It's pretty good, very good actually. You'll pay a fortune if you buy this at the auto parts store, by the way. It's the W77. The W70, I think it's W70. Smaller numbers, they're smaller guns, and then you've got smaller holes here where the paint comes out. This one is fairly big. I don't know if you can see there. Just when I press the trigger here, you can actually see the size of the hole. See there. But it is fairly big, so you know they're really hard to clog. We've got the same finish. I don't know why they make smaller ones. I guess if you try to put a really thin paint on this one, it'll just sort of sputter, right? Because you'll get big drops. So this is for really thick materials. You see that I've used this for priming the Cadillac. And by the way, on the Cadillac, you can actually use the primer with a spatula to fill up small holes. You don't have to use this stupid body filler. But there it is. So this is what I use to spray this stuff. Once again, if you try to use a small nozzle, here's what the box looks like. I'll show you guys. It's Chinese, but I mean, I think I paid like $20 for it. They didn't even have nozzles this big at the store, at the auto parts store, but I've seen the other ones. They were over $100. So one was like 130, so this one would probably cost 200. Literally 10 times more, something like that. Right? It's got stainless steel muzzle, stainless steel plunger. You can remove that stuff for clean out. I don't think it says here the thickness. Sorry, the width of the nozzle. I think it's 2.5 millimeters. Just trying to check here. Tell you guys. Yeah, no, it doesn't say on here. But yeah, it's very, very wide. Before, when I didn't know about this, well, it's not that I didn't know about it, I was just not thinking of it. I just bought one of the cheaper guns. It's the here's the names. Here's the markings for the other ones. You see, here's the nozzles. They just didn't mark. Yeah, they just didn't check off the box. You see, they have the 2mm nozzle, 2.5mm, and the 3mm. Mine must be the 3mm. I don't know, but all three of these ones are really big. They have smaller ones that are like 1.2 millimeter, 1.7, and the if you try to put thick paint, you know, it will either clog up or it won't spray at all because the paint's too thick to go through the holes. So when I was trying to paint the Cadillac, no, that was the other car. I was trying to paint another car, and I bought the paint, right, and I put it in the spray gun, and literally nothing would come out. I turned the pressure all the way up, nothing. Not a single drop would come out, right? So we got mad at it, and I thought it was the gun, but that was the problem. It's just too viscous, right? That gun there, you need to have a gun with a wide nozzle in order to be able to spray this kind of really viscous paint, right? So yeah, again, if you go the other way around, you put paint that's too thin, then it'll just spray too much, right? Imagine you have a big pipe like that, and only a little bit of paint is coming out, it'll just drip off, because the air, instead of pushing the paint, will just sort of ride along the paint, right? But that's what will happen. So another thing that I will like to mention is, you know what, I will disassemble these little, I don't have the kick down switch, which is also called the throttle switch on the manual. It's either called a throttle switch or a kick down switch, because you literally press down on it. If it would be located, it's just a switch with two-way switch. So it turns, it's not an on and off switch exactly. It'll transfer electricity between, there's 2 points up here, 2 points down here, and it's like a plate will go like this up and down between them, so it'll connect these 2 points or connect the other 2 points, right? And you can look that up in the manual. Maybe I'll do another further explanation on that, but I don't have that. But it would be located under the gas pedal, literally under the gas pedal. And that way, if you wanted to press the gas really hard and all the way down, it would touch that switch, and it apparently would switch the overdrive off so that you could have the full power of the direct drive, you know. But I don't really think it's not really necessary. Unless you just wouldn't have to do it manually. I'll give you more explanation on that later, but I don't have that right now, and it is kind of expensive. It's about 150 bucks if you try to buy it. But what I might do is just put 2 switches instead of 1, right? Or I'll actually make the switch myself. I bet you that they sell switches like that at the electrical store. But it was also called the throttle switch because sometimes instead of putting it under the gas pedal, they switched it up to next to the carburetor where the accelerator pedal linkage, you know, here's the accelerator pedal, and then it's attached to a steel bar. It's pretty thick, and then you press the pedal, it actually presses the steel bar and pushes the throttle on the carburetor. And so that's why it was called throttle switch, because instead of putting the switch under the gas pedal, they moved it up to near the carburetor. That way it's just far from the road, right, where there's junk and dirt and rust, water, and all that. So that's why it's either called a throttle switch or a kick down switch. So that's what it would do. I don't have that. I also have the cable. This cable, the overdrive cable, would go from this hole here to under the dash. Then you'd pull it out. You'd pull it towards you if you wanted to turn the overdrive off, right? And then you leave it inside, close to the dash, if you wanted the overdrive to operate normally. I don't have that cable. It's not too expensive. It's about $60, something like that. But it does have, remember this here? This is sort of the where the cable would go through, right? and it just goes under one of the bolts, the four main bolts I like to call them, the ones that hold everything together, the housings together. That's where it'll go, and it'll be obvious to you once you have the cable in. Right now I don't have the cable, so it doesn't make sense for me to show you. But yeah, there it is. Now this piece of rubber here would go around the solenoid here. That and around it has a case for it. Just protect it. Now this switch here, this is called the lockout switch. I'm not entirely sure what it does right now. I can't really explain it to you in detail, but I know that it turns the ignition on and off in order to activate the solenoid here. But it would go right here, right at the end here. Just turn this around here to show you. I see that when I move this lever, this shaft will come in and out. See, there it is, out. In, out, in, out, in, out, in. And that will push the switch in and out, in and out. Now this is it's a pretty simple switch, just on and off. So it goes that way. Just push it this way, just sort of see what happens to the switch there. You see that it's damaged here, it's got a hole here. Unfortunately, I'll either have to rebuild this or just buy a new one. I'm not really sure of the importance of it yet. See the little terminals inside, they're moving in and out. See that? There we have it. So I guess we're done with this. Okay, and the other thing that I've done is that this solenoid here, let's remove these bolts here. It'd be really nice to paint the inside of this transmission, but you need special paint that resists oil. I know Napa has an industrial paint. It is expensive, but it does resist diesel. Even when it's wet, unbelievable. It won't mix with gasoline, it won't mix with diesel. That thing is, holy fuck. So if you want to try a pretty resistant paint, get that paint. It's a lot cheaper compared to the other ones. I've heard of people spending hundreds of dollars in paint. 500, 600. That's fucking joke. Now remember that this here has like a flat side. See, like there it's flat. The way you see it now. If I turn it now, it's round. You see? The idea of this is that it'll enter into that pawl, and once you twist it, right, it won't come out because it'll. If you just put it in like this, see, it goes in just like that, just the way without any twisting. Well, the problem is that it slides out easily. It just slides out, right? Not easily. It just slides out. It's not supposed to do that. You see that if I turn it now, it doesn't slide out anymore. Now this here, this shaft here, this solenoid, is called a plunger. It has to push the pawl in. The pawl is that little square sort of that little chamfered square thing. Just look it up in the manual diagram. But it has to push that in, but it also has to pull it back. Now if it's not locked, it will push it in, obviously, but it won't pull it back. So the solenoid will go back, plunger will go back in, but the pawl will still be locked in there. Now, and so the manual actually does mention this mistake. It's a little mistake, but we can easily fix it. So I'll just show you that right now. Well, first thing you have to do is remove these two bolts here. That will allow this case to slide off. There's two nuts here at the top. You can use a screwdriver, you can use a chisel. Already put some anti-seize on it, so let's see if I can finish this before half an hour. It should be really quick. So yeah, just make sure that this, you have to twist it in order to get it in. Once it's aligned with the holes, even without the bolts, you shouldn't be able to put it in. Once again, you should not be able to pull it out. In order to pull it out, you have to twist it, and then it'll come out. Alright, not the opposite way. Right now it's the opposite way, you see? It's twisted, and it doesn't come out, and then when I align it with the holes, it comes out easily. That plunger has to be stuck, it has to be connected to that pawl in there. Another thing that has been mentioned before is that sometimes people, even the mechanics, they would drop this solenoid. And the only way you could damage it is to drop it, you know, and this would, you know, bend it here and ruin the wires inside. But this thing, it is pretty indestructible. But I mean, if I were to make a better design, I'd just make this even thicker. I mean, you could even get a big pipe here, big thick pipe, just a, you know, regular black plumbing pipe, and weld it here. Wow, that would really be fucking nice. Really ugly. Maybe it would sort of be ugly unless you. Yeah, I mean, I could put some stainless steel around it to make it look nice. To look just like chrome, but I mean, I'd rather be, you know, ugly but really strong and reliable rather than pretty looking and just like a Barbie girl. And these are the these two posts here. They will come out. One of them is seized in there, but you'll see that the other one I was able to get out, take out. You only really just need to take out one of them. But you'll see that there's there's a hex shape there, so that you can fit a 1/4 inch hex key, hex wrench, whatever, in there. You can we can unbolt this. But in order to realign this, can I just not push it in and align it that way? I don't think so. Let's see. It doesn't turn. It won't turn because it's connected. I try to push it in and turn it. It won't turn because it's connected to this here. So fuck, I will have to remove these bolts here. These nuts, sorry. Pardon me. Now, one thing that I also found strange is this here. It does seem like there's a lot of, you know, pressure on it. And once the plunger is out, it looks like it's wrong, you know. But it is supposed to be like that. It's big space here. It just seems to me that it's just